Okay. All right. Well, hello, class. So today, for today's lecture, I'm going to be interviewing my sister, Alex. We will get into why I've decided to interview her, but it's pretty cool. Um, so yeah, what we've talked about in class has been kind of all over the place with exercise prescription. We've been down ACSM's route, what they have to say. We've taken a physiological standpoint and how can we train energy systems. And then we just finished up talking about NSCA and what they have to say about resistance training, specifically within a more athletic scenario. Um, but yeah, those are only pieces and bits of the exercise science puzzle. So I wanted to bring in my sister today so that we could get another piece of the puzzle. Um, so Alex, yeah, please. Well, thank you, first of all, for joining me today. Go ahead and tell the class just a little bit about yourself, who you are, your background in exercise science and sport, and fill us in on your job.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Cole. Excited
Yeah.
to be here, excited to have a conversation and kind of shed some light, I guess, on what I do. But yeah, my name is Alex, or as my soldiers and athletes most commonly know me as Coach Buck. I am a full-time strength and conditioning coach for the United States Army. Specifically, I am within their H2F, Holistic Health and Fitness System. And I've been a strength and conditioning coach in this system for about 3.5 years at this point. Like most strength and conditioning coaches, I started out as an athlete, and that's what very much interested me in sports science and sports performance. Right. Once I realized there was an entire field dedicated to really understanding the why behind
Mm.
performance physiology and how do we go about achieving a performance goal, I found that fascinating, wanted to dive deeper into that. And that led me to my bachelor's degree, which is officially in exercise science education. I was fortunate to do that bachelor's degree at two universities. I started off at the University of New Mexico before transferring and officially finishing that degree at The Ohio State University. I also ran cross country and track for both of those universities, which is a very cool, very wonderful experience. Additional certifications, I'm a certified strength and conditioning specialist through the NSCA, very common cert required within H2F that's required for all of our strength and conditioning coaches.
Yeah.
I'm also a USAW level one certified coach.
Great. Great. Thank you so much for that background. Um, yeah, yeah. So I'm super interested in learning more about your role. So my job in the exercise science field is kind of like I teach so much of it, but yet I almost like practice so little of it because my job is teaching, you know? And so it's kind of all from a theoretical standpoint. And so what is a typical work week for me? Lecture prep, lecture, lecture prep, grading, lecture, and so on, which is great. But what does a typical workday or work week look like for you actually living out this field of strength and conditioning?
Absolutely. Well, the unique thing about H2F in the United States Army is it looks a little bit different depending on which unit you're assigned to.
Hmm.
In my 3.5 years, I've been able to work with three different units, and each time my day to day has looked a little bit different depending on what the needs are for those soldiers that I'm serving.
Yeah.
So, for my current situation right now, every single morning, we start our day with, they call it PT physical training, right? So
Okay.
I've got my time from 0600 to 0700, 6 to 7 a.m. And that is our time every morning we dedicate towards PT. And with my groups, that usually means we are either in the weight room or out at the track, out on the roads, doing something to work on our readiness and lethality for that hour, right? After
Hmm.
that morning PT, it really just depends on the day, right? I'll typically have one or two other groups that have a training session. If I don't, that time is going to be filled with either writing programs either for individuals to complete on their own time, prepping programs in advance for my groups that I have in person. I might be doing some educational lectures with my
Hmm.
groups. It might
Okay.
also be more of an admin day, right? I might be working on the weight room that day. I might
Hmm.
be collaborating with other coaches to work on continuing education opportunities. It really just depends, but there's always plenty to do to fill the time.
Hmm. Kind of a question stemming off of that one. I know you mentioned that sometimes you will create plans for specific soldiers. Like in what scenarios warrant kind of some more special attention to a soldier?
Yes, so great question. Specifically with the units that I work with, so I am at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, which is here in Columbia, South Carolina, and that's specifically a basic training installation, right?
Hmm.
So we receive over 50% of the newest soldiers that
Hmm.
come into the Army.
A lot.
Vast majority are coming through Fort Jackson, right? A cool part of that is I get to work with the drill sergeants that are the ones that are transforming these civilians into soldiers. The
Hmm.
downside is these drills are extremely, extremely limited in
Hmm.
their time, right? For that morning PT, that hour that I'm working with my groups on their fitness, the drills are actively working with the trainees, right? And as soon as they're done with PT, then they're moving on to other required trainings that they have to do in those
Hmm.
short 10 weeks that we have these basic training cycles.
Yeah.
So, very commonly, I will create those individual programs for my drills that don't have the flexibility to leave their trainees for
Hmm.
that morning PT hour. So, really, for them, it's finding some kind of middle ground of what time do they really have available, right? Because they also have families, they
Hmm.
have personal lives outside of this. What
Yeah.
time do we have to still at least maintain, right, their fitness where they're at currently and
Hmm.
balance really just work life, personal responsibilities, find some kind of middle ground there. That's my most common individual program that I will write is for those that can't physically be present with me while I'm running my sessions.
Gotcha. Um, thank you so much for answering that. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes, I can still hear you okay.
Okay, can you see me? Sorry, my screen is frozen ATM.
You are frozen from my end as well.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. One. All right. It just
Oh, there
um
you go. You're back.
yeah, sorry. Students, do not get Xfinity Wi-Fi. It keeps going in and out. It stinks. I think the recording's still going.
I
So,
believe so. I think we're good.
okay. Okay. So kind of so for us, and like what we've been talking about in class, it's ACSM kind of dominates the playing field where it has historically in this class. I'm okay with that, but I'm also not. I think tailoring a 16-week course solely on ACSM's recommendations is incredible. If you can make that much content out of their textbook, you're monologuing about something. Um, and so for us, I mean, it's apparently healthy people. How can we get them to meet 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity exercise? Desk workers, teachers, accountants. It's just people who like want health and like that's their goal. Um, and for ACSM's purpose, that's okay. What are common goals that you have for your recruits? Because for us, it's health or general muscular fitness or increasing flexibility as I'm aging, really just kind of like baseline goals. So, what are some strength and conditioning goals that you commonly gravitate towards?
Yeah, I think you kind of started to touch on it really well, where you're talking about a lot of your population you're working with, you are looking for goals that really center around improving overall health and
Mm,
improving quality of life, improving longevity. Where once we flip over into kind of a strength and conditioning setting, usually that objective switches over to now it is a performance objective.
mm,
It is a performance goal, right? High level performance isn't always necessarily the healthiest thing, right? We are
mm.
looking at a
Yeah.
performance objective. A very easy example of that would be to look at like ultra marathon runners, right? Is it healthy to be running 80, 100 miles per week? Not necessarily, but is it
Mm,
necessary for the performance objective of that specific event? Yes, that's going to be necessary. So then how
mm,
do we balance that, right? How do we achieve that performance objective while always kind of flirting with that red line, right? We
mm.
are always pushing the envelope. So
Yeah.
within the parameters of the US Army, right? Our primary performance objectives, especially within H2F, is we are looking to increase readiness and improve lethality. And we're going to do that by attempting to minimize risk of injury, right? We can't
Mm,
prevent injury, right? But we can try and minimize the risk, right? And we're
yeah.
going to do that by attempting to decrease the number of duty days that they have to miss and improve their physical performance testing scores through the AFT, right?
Mm,
Typically, what that ends up panning out to look like is we want them to be relatively strong, so strong relative to their own body weight and body mass. And we also need them to be cardiovascularly fit, right?
mm,
It's an interesting balance of they kind of need to stay ready at all
mm.
times, right? Because there
Yeah.
is always that possibility that in an instance, they get called to go overseas, that they're deployed, right? You don't want to have your group in the middle of a very exhausting and fatiguing high volume block the second that they have to go be ready. So it's finding a balance of how do we tap into a little bit of everything while
Mm,
also continuing to progress them, right?
mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so specifically with their AFTs, because that's kind of our standardized testing that we use across the board. We're looking at a variety of tests. We look at their 3RM deadlift to get an
Okay.
idea of max strength. We do an event called the sprint drag carry, which is a combination of load carriage, sprinting, lateral movement, shuffling, but ultimately it's a very anaerobic event. It usually ends
Mm,
up being about 2 to 3 minutes.
okay.
So not comfortable, right? Um,
Yeah.
very, very uncomfortable to perform that sprint drag carry. They also have a plank for time. They have a hand release push up for as many reps as they can do within 2 minutes. And then they have their 2 mile at the very end, which is our
Wow.
measure of cardiovascular fitness, right? It's not a hard test to pass, right?
Mm,
Um, but that is the standard that the Army has set across the board. You will get some
mm,
fluctuations depending on the gender and MOS, right? So combat MOS is going to have a different requirement than say a support MOS, right? The Army,
MOS?
your job, right?
Okay.
Um, Essentially, our combat MOS, that's going to be your individuals that are on the front lines if they're getting
Mm,
deployed. Support MOS, right? That's going to be somebody that's maybe more involved, say like a desk job in the Army, because there's lots of those, right?
mm.
There's individuals that are involved in the planning, in the coordination, in the scheduling, making sure all these little pieces come together to support whatever the mission is, right? So
Yeah.
combat MOS is going to be held to a slightly higher standard than support MOS. But if you're interested in any of those standards or the events themselves, there's a lot of information posted online for that AFT, and you can find a lot of great kind of details on that test, and then also some of kind of the science and the background that went into creating that new AFT. It's relatively new. We got away
Hmm.
from the old pure endurance fitness test that was in place for a long, long time. This new performance test has been in the works for about 5-ish years.
Dang.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was actually just about to ask like what you thought of those tests. Because I
Huge,
didn't know if what's that?
huge improvement, huge
Good.
improvement. Previously, the last version of the Army's fitness test was simply max sit-ups, max push-ups, and 2 mile run.
Mm,
So we were looking at purely endurance capabilities, right? Which is important, right? And
yeah.
completely important if we're looking at physical performance. But then at the same time, like, do you want the soldier that's able to crank out a whole bunch of sit-ups in 2 minutes, or do you want the soldier that's lifting 2 times their body weight on
Mm,
a trap bar deadlift, right?
yeah.
Strength is a huge fitness variable that we also need to consider when we're looking at our service members.
Mm. It's interesting hearing you talk about those kind of archaic testing methods of like muscular endurance. How many push-ups can you do? How many sit-ups can you do? Because when I was about 10 months or so ago, when I was going through like police department hiring processes, I did those same tests.
Yeah.
They saw how many push-ups I could do,
Yeah.
sit-ups, like we did a 2 mile run. Um, and I think that like the police infrastructure is actually working to update their testing as well because they're realizing that it's just not, it doesn't apply well to like a combat situation. Um, so, okay. So I know that prior to Army, you did some work with like general population. What is the biggest difference that you've noticed between working at like Redline, for example, versus now what you do?
Yeah, so previously I was in the private sector, specifically working with youth athletes of a pretty big range, anywhere from 6 years old up to, I believe we had about 20 years old, on the same floor, right, in the same session. So a big age range in these sessions.
Yeah.
And with those populations, right, I wouldn't even so much call that general pop because they were athletic populations that still had a performance objective, right?
Hmm.
The performance objective just looked a little bit different, mostly because of the age groups that we were dealing with, right? When we're working with youth athletes, there's a lot of research that really supports long-term athletic development, right?
Hmm.
Meaning really taking your time when it comes to the foundation of strength, the foundation of movement, of not skipping over steps and specializing too early, right?
Hmm.
How do we set these athletes up for the greatest success over the long term, right? Make sure they have the movement pattern down and
Hmm.
then overload them in that movement pattern, right? Get them extremely strong through their major lifts, their squat, their hinge, and their pinch, right? And continue to build on those and start to incorporate athletic movements that then translate to their sports over the long term, right?
Okay.
So within that population, it was very much hitting the basics of strength and movement, and perfecting it so that
Hmm.
those athletes could be successful really in whatever sport they were going into, right?
Yeah.
In this population of the US Army, we still have that performance objective. But like I said, it looks a little bit different because we don't necessarily have that one game day, that one
Hmm.
race day that we are training up for. Like, yes, we have our AFT testing days about twice a year, but there is no big one performance that we are training towards, right? We want to continuously kind of be improving while tapping in to different training variables kind of at all points, right?
Hmm.
So if we're talking about programming and periodization, right? I like to do a mix of conjugate sequencing where I can kind of strategically prioritize and deprioritize certain training variables at the same time. So I'm
Hmm.
never looking at just one in isolation.
Yeah.
And I'm also not trying to do everything all at once, right? But
Okay.
I'm making sure that certain variables are kind of more prioritized than others, and then shifting those around depending on where we are in our training block, where we are relative to testing day. So I
Hmm.
would say it's very much just knowing your population and kind of knowing what they need and you being able to adapt to that population and not necessarily force a one size fits all, right? That is
Hmm.
rarely ever going to work in any population. We're the professionals. It is always our job to adjust to whatever that population needs.
Hmm. Gotcha. So with the younger athletes, you talked about really kind of like a firm foundation,
Mhm.
like being able to do fun, like foundational movements well,
Yep.
and just building up that. How well do these Army recruits move coming in?
Ooh, it is such a wide range, such a wide range, right? When we're talking about recruits that we get into basic training, not only are we looking at just an extreme range of backgrounds and experiences, there's a massive like age range. Majority are coming fresh out of high school, right? So
Hmm.
I would say a lot of the population is around 19 to 25 years old. But then we'll also get our older recruits, I would say in their 40s and 50s, that are also coming
Wow.
a lot, right? A lot of life experience as well. And we get everybody, right? So we
Hmm.
have, like I said, we have some that will go on to their combat MOS kind of jobs, and others that are really here for more of the support MOS. So it really depends, right?
Hmm.
Um, in my specific battalion, we will get about 1,200 trainees per
Wow.
week cycle, right? So you get a lot of trainees in each one of these cycles, coming in with such a wide range of capabilities and experiences. Right, you've
Hmm.
got your trainees that you can very quickly identify were a part of some kind of sports or athletic team, right?
Yeah.
They move a bit more athletically. They pick up weight a bit more. I don't want to say aggressively, but um, there's an intent to the lifts and the workouts
Hmm.
they're doing, right? And then we also have, believe it or not, we get trainees that come in that have not done any kind of physical prep for the Army. And basic training is not a fun experience if you're coming in not expecting to do any kind of physical training, because
Yeah.
it's a daily occurrence. Um, so it's a huge range as far as the movement and capabilities go. Once again, we see it all, right? We see some that are coming in with like very rounded postures, right? Very much looking like they have been sitting in a prolonged kind of stagnant position for years and years.
Hmm.
Got others that are coming in that are very capable, right? Their squat and their hinge look fantastic, and there's really no work that we need to do there. Um, so how do you go about then addressing such giant numbers of a
Yeah.
population with such limited time?
Yeah.
Um, and specifically with basic training, um, I hate to say that it is what it is kind of situation. All of these trainees are eventually going to get to a brigade that has H2F, right? That has
Hmm.
professionals like myself. So I really put my time and energy into the permanent party, right? So the drill sergeants, the other staff, the other
Yeah.
cadre at my battalion, because then that will directly impact the training that those trainees receive. And once they
Hmm.
get through basic, they can go link up with their H2F professionals, and then we can really dive deep into what movement and efficiencies are there. What strength are we lacking? What
Hmm.
other fitness variables do we need to work on to really make you a successful soldier and then also just improve your quality of life, right?
Hmm.
A very cool part of my job is I get to be very much involved in the Army, but I'm not Army, right? I'm still civilian. I'm a DoD contractor. And I like to really talk to a lot of my soldiers about the fact that, yes, I want them to have long, successful Army careers, but I also very much just care about the person,
Hmm.
right? I know their dads, their moms, their brothers, their sisters, they are their own unique human. And I want to set them up for success in their life. right? I want
Hmm.
to improve their quality of life and longevity, whatever long-term injuries they're dealing with. How do we make those better for you to set you up for success once you're out of the army, right? And these resources aren't readily available. How can we
Yeah.
set you up for success over the long term?
Okay. Dang. Wow, you probably do get just a lot of different kinds of athletes. Wow.
We see
Funneled in your
everything.
direction.
We see
Wow.
absolutely everything. Oh yeah.
Dang. Dang. Hey, let's see here. So when I think honestly kind of one of the I'm very thankful for my job in teaching. But like I said, finished up a master's degree, kind of rolled over into teaching. And so like what you're talking about is I mean the application of what you learned. The application of like your certifications and um that's not necessarily something that I've been able to do in full. Um, and so I'm kind of curious that when you do go to make plans or focus on key pieces of training, what's kind of like the like informing source of like your programs? Um, are you a fan of like NSCA or do you do like digging of your own into like articles and research? What kind of what kind of informs what you create?
Absolutely. I love that question actually. So yes, majority of my programs are going to be based off of um, what we know from the NSCA as far as when it comes to certain training objectives, how do we uh, provide a stimulus that elicits a certain adaptation, right? Are we looking to get bigger? Are we looking to get stronger? Are we looking to get faster? Are we trying to do all three? Are there other things that we are trying to do? And then how do we make that work in a real life setting, right? Not in a specific laboratory setting where we have
Right.
certain time frame, we have a certain population, and everything is controlled, right? So it's very much a combo. I love the NSCA journal. I also like to um, back up anything that I find in those journals with other journals, right? So looking for a uh, repeated result, right? Specifically,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
um, the British Medical Journal is an awesome one. It's very hard to get into the British Medical Journal.
Hmm.
So if you see something in there that matches what the NSCA has reported, probably pretty solid, right?
Hmm.
Um, I also really love to pick the brains of my coworkers, right? I
Hmm.
work on a team of there are seven other coaches within my brigade, and down the hall on the other side of the building, there's an additional seven more for our neighboring brigade. Each one of those coaches is coming with their own unique skill set and their
Yeah.
own unique education experiences, internships, right? Almost all of us have coached in different sectors and different populations at some point. So I understand that these coaches are going to be bringing knowledge and experiences that I don't have, and it's worth having a conversation, right?
Hmm.
I love being able to bounce ideas off my coworkers and understand some of their thought process of where they are coming from. And I think just being always open um, to different thought processes is
Yeah.
huge as well,
Yeah.
right? Having a humble mindset and a growth mindset within this field is extremely, extremely valuable,
Hmm.
um, because it is very much a soft science, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of nuance to it. There's a lot of different ways we can go about achieving a performance objective successfully. There's a lot of ways we can horribly go about trying to achieve a performance objective, right? So, how do we take all that we know and kind of narrow it down to what we believe is the most optimal, right? I would say anybody that speaks in absolutes, probably be wary just because it is such a soft science with such nuance to it,
Hmm.
right? If someone is confidently saying this is the only way to do this, period, I'm going to be very skeptical of that individual because most
Hmm.
likely There's a lot more nuance to it. Um, the population, the situation, the training history, there's so much that's going to impact that program, um, that you kind of have to be flexible and be able to pull from a lot of different um, pieces of information, pieces of
Mm.
research to find what is most optimal.
Yeah. Only a Sith.
Yes,
Reals and
I
absolutes.
love whipping that one out when
Yeah.
somebody gives me something so confidently. Only a Sith works in
Yeah.
absolutes.
I I think what you described is just like it's such a good balance of one, you have like these objective measures from research, but there's also such a huge philosophy component. And
Yep.
so, gosh, I think what you said about having like an open mind is so important. Um, the field's always digging up new research. We're always learning more and more. Um, and I know just from like what I experience in working with students, um, like bodybuilding is very popular. And
Yes.
so I'll get a lot of like, oh, well, this is the best way to do this exercise. And it's like, from a bodybuilding standpoint, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
The objective.
just because a joint moves like that and it's going to cause max hypertrophy, do we want to do that?
Yeah.
It's like, what's the aim here?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was super super great. Super great answer. Thank you. Um, so this question, I don't know if you're able to answer it as easily as I can. I was going to ask you about, so let me just say it. Hang on. ACSM, when we want to give someone exercise, we go through frequency, intensity, time, and your type.
Hmm.
And for us, 80% of the time, frequency is like 3 to 5 days. Intensity is 40 to 60% is your moderate, 60 up's your vigorous. Time is pretty standard, like 20 to 60 minutes. We have established guidelines. I'm assuming that there aren't necessarily established guidelines with your soldiers. Because I know even you mentioned earlier, like your periodization, it's always kind of changing. So I guess like what does a regular frequency, intensity, time, and type look like for you, if you can answer that?
Yes, that's such a great question. And the most honest answer is really it depends. It
Hmm.
depends on the group that you work with, right? The population and their availability and their capabilities are going to determine that more than anything. A great example of that, before I got here at Fort Jackson, I was previously up at Fort Drum, New York, working on an airfield. So I was working with a lot of pilots and a lot of mechanics. The downside of working with the pilots is they have to hit their night flight hours.
Hmm.
So they are flying um, at night. They're not going to be coming in for PT those next couple days, right? Because they can't be coming into work after they've been up all night
Yeah.
flying those hours. So the availability of that population was extremely different, right?
Hmm.
A lot of those groups, I only saw them twice a week. And so if I only saw them twice a week, some of my mindset was, well, the easiest thing they can do independently is probably going to be their cardio. So I can probably provide some general recommendations on what they could do 1 to 2 times a week outside
Hmm.
of my supervised sessions. For the 2 times a week that I have them in here, let's get them strong. Let's work
Hmm.
on the movements of their primary lifts. Let's increase their absolute strength, increase their strength endurance. Let's try and increase their power output. And if we can do that with the short amount of time and availability that we have, awesome. I know I'm setting them up for success over the long term.
Hmm.
With my groups that I have now, I get a lot more control with them, which is really cool, right? A couple of my groups I get 5 times a week. And
Nice.
when I have that kind of availability, now I can get a little bit more creative in how I want to dose their training, right?
Hmm.
where now my frequency is multiple times a week. Okay, how many times do I want to put them in the weight room? How many times do I need to get them, say, out on the track or the roads? When do we need to get them off the track and the roads? When do we need to implement some other alternate cardio, right? And a lot of it is really determined by your population and their capabilities, right? Very commonly, I'll show up to a unit and the unit is decently strong, but the movement quality is off where I don't want to overload their back squat until we're getting at least 90 and we're doing it without our knees caving in and without our heels coming off the ground, right? So now we have
Yeah.
to backtrack a little bit and make sure that we've checked kind of all of these prereq boxes before I can start having you heavy back squat, right?
Yeah.
Got to make sure that your overhead press is solid and that we're actually getting that full overhead extension before I have you doing any kind of push press to work on
Mm.
any power output, right? So really knowing your population is what's going to determine how you kind of move forward with that, right?
Mm.
And ultimately letting that performance objective be the North Star of everything that you do, right? And for me, a lot of that comes down to we need to be relatively strong and we need to have a solid aerobic base. If
Mm.
we can do those things within the context of the physical demands of the United States Army, they're going to be pretty solid, right?
Mm.
Different populations are going to need more, right? Certain schools like Ranger School, they're going to have their own set of performance standards that you have to hit. The AFT is not sufficient. They're going to have their own physical performance testing that's a bit
Yeah.
more rigorous, right? So it all just it depends, I suppose.
Mm.
But you're always using that performance objective as your North Star and then looking at the availability that you do have and saying, okay, with the small amount that I can invest, how am I going to get the greatest return on
Mm.
that investment, right? What is going to make the biggest impact overall? And with my groups, usually I'm going to prioritize the strength, right? I
Mm.
need to get them stronger because if I can get them stronger, then I can make them more powerful. If I can get them
Mm.
stronger, then I can get them faster, right? So usually that is my kind of baseline goal is all right, across the board, we need to increase strength. If we need to improve cardio, that's something I can assign you to do on your own, right? How do we get the biggest bang for our buck with limited time?
Mm. Okay. Really sounds like you're kind of in a reaction based setting. Like whatever the soldiers
Yes, yes,
do is kind of like, well, how in the world are we going to work with this?
yep.
Um,
I mean,
but I think,
no different than a sports team, right? Like
yeah.
you you are not going to train a football team the same that you would train a cross country team, right?
Mm.
Are there going to be certain training variables that both need? Do both need to be strong? Absolutely. Do they both need to be fast? Absolutely. But the way we go about getting them improved in those variables is going to look a little bit different depending on the sport. And once again, that falls on the strength and conditioning professional to be able to manipulate that stimuli and those training variables to get that desired adaptation and outcome.
Mm. Gotcha. I think that even though, I mean, ACSM gives you these clear-cut guidelines, I mean, I think the general population still kind of falls into that same scenario. Like, hey, because of my busy life and family, I'm only going to work out with you 2 nights a week for 45 minutes max. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I think the principles that you're discussing with the Army directly translate to just busyness and demands, even when it comes to just your average dude or
Yeah.
dudette.
And a great kind of point that I feel like you kind of touched on there is like that they want to work out with you,
Mm.
the the buy-in, the belief in the program, right? And that's universal across all populations is there has to be a certain level of trust and buy-in
Mm.
for that program to work, right? I could have the greatest program in the whole army, but if my soldiers don't believe in it and they don't trust me, we're not going to get the adaptation that we're looking for. And the same is true like in the private sector, right? If you have a personal training client that's coming to you, and they've given you their goal, they want to lose weight and they want to tone up. And you know you need to put them in a slight calorie deficit. You probably need to do some hypertrophy work and probably a little bit of zone two work. They might not like that. That might be uncomfortable, right?
Mm.
So, how do you get them to those goals and create that buy-in and trust, right? And sometimes you have to kind of creatively give and take a little bit with the program for them to buy in. A funny example I love to use with my groups is they love the weight room, right? They love their upper body movements, right?
Oh yeah.
Everybody loves a good bench day, right? We're not a fan of our endurance days, right? We're not a fan of our long run days. So with my group, kind of a fun little buy-in process that I've used is whenever they have a long cardio day, they come back and they've got an arm farm waiting for them on the whiteboard, right? So we're going to hit our zone 2 miles. And then when you come in, we're going to get a good upper body pump right before the weekend. You're going to leave feeling
There we go.
but right, exactly. Finding some kind of middle ground that still allows you to get the performance objective done.
Mm.
Right? What are we working towards on that specific day? I need them to work on their zone two a little bit, but I need that effort there. So here's your arm farm when you finish this.
Arm
Good
farm.
job.
I love
Good
that.
job. Let's hit some bicep curls. Let's hit some tricep extensions and call it a day.
Mm. That's cool. That's
That
cool.
one's pretty popular.
No, I love that. I love that. I'm sure they love getting that pump.
Oh, they do.
Let's see. Um, so you injury is huge. I mean, we even with just like normal people, I feel like it's almost more common. I feel like you're less likely to have an uninjured client than you are somebody with perfect anatomy. So you get a soldier and they come to you from a relatively uninjured standpoint. What are like your next steps if they incur an injury or they come in the next day and they report a new injury? Well, how do you go about working with that?
Yeah, that's also a great question. I would say the vast majority of the soldiers we deal with are working with some kind of either current injury or previous injury that they have had long term. We
Yeah.
see a lot of low back pain, right? They're required to do a lot of rucking, which is where they've got their giant rucksacks on their back, holding anywhere from 40 to 80 pounds, depending on their MOS, and they are marching upwards of 12 miles with that ruck on their back. You do that over the course of 20, 40 years, there's a chance that you're going to have some injuries kind of pile up. So, within my scope of practice, right? If someone is coming to me kind of with a new injury, they're reporting a new injury or an old injury, the first thing I'm going to do is refer them to the professionals that we have within H2F that can assess that directly, right?
Mm.
I get to be a part of a team that has athletic trainers, physical therapists, and occupational therapists that
Wow.
all work within our brigade. So, my first thing will be to connect them with that professional that can
Mm.
help kind of diagnose and identify what is going on. And once that's been identified, then I can work directly with that professional, say like that athletic trainer, and kind of figure out what kind of training modifications or parameters we need to put in place so that this individual can still progress and rehab. Right. So
Mm.
I'm always going to refer to the professional who specifically specializes in injury. Right.
Yeah.
From a rehab standpoint, usually it's going to be working on some strength, right? Usually some kind of either strength and balance or any efficiency. That's usually where my role is going to come
Gotcha. Wow, sounds like there's a really good like wraparound of services that's able to kind of meet the soldiers'
in. Yes.
needs, which is really, really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
a great way to kind of visualize that, right, is H2F is very much a performance team. So something that you would find like it in a collegiate setting or a professional sports team setting, where you
yeah.
have all of these different professionals all working towards the same goal, right? Where
Mm.
you have your strength coaches, you have your sports medicine staff, you have your performance dietitians, you have your cognitive sports specialists, right? Everybody that falls under the same roof and supports these athletes or soldiers towards whatever performance goal that we are working
Mm,
towards, and collaborating as you do so, right? It's been very cool to see it finally take place kind of at the ground level of the Army.
mm,
The Army has had these groups in the past, but they've usually been reserved for certain MOSs like special forces, right?
mm.
Um, the most elite of the Army. And the
Yeah.
Army has seen that value and is now pushing it out to all levels, all brigades.
Mm. That's really cool.
It is
That's
really
really cool.
cool.
Do have you noticed? I mean, you've been in working with the Army for a little while now. Do you see the value of those services, like in
Yeah.
your soldiers?
Yes, absolutely. So we see this translate in a couple ways. I wish I had all of the exact numbers right in front of me. I do not. But we know that brigades with H2F have shown improved rates of certain behavioral health
Mm.
um, statistics, right? So, units that have H2F have seen decreased substance abuse. Those units have seen decreases in suicide rates. Those
That's
units
huge.
right. Those units have seen improved quality of life scores. And then from an actual physical performance standpoint, I keep track of all of my results, right? As far as what we're doing in the weight room on a daily basis, right? I'm going to track my weights and then I'm also going to monitor our AFT performance test, right? And
Yeah.
track that over the long term. That number specifically has been harder for us to keep track of. So we do have a lot of great data on essentially the quality of life improvement of brigades with H2F. We're still working on how do we put together a very robust collection of data specifically in regards to physical performance, right? Because that is a huge piece of what H2F does.
Yeah.
It's still a fairly new program, so still finding a way to collect all of that data and present that in a very meaningful way on a big picture scale is still in
Mm.
progress. But at least on the ground floor, I'm going to track all of my weights, all of my performance testing to make sure that the program is moving us in the direction that we actually want to go.
Mm. So there probably will be a day when all that you are doing like feeds into like all the like current research, you think?
Um, I would hope so, right? So research in the Army is a bit tricky because it's always going to go through the Army's kind of research system.
Okay.
So they are always going to have to approve and kind of give their blessing on any research that is done or any data that is
Mm.
reported, which is why it takes a little bit longer for us to get some of those numbers put out. But for the sake of my job and being able to defend what I do, I'm always going to track my data on the ground floor, right, of
Mm.
what my people are doing. And I think that's huge across the board, not just in H2F, but in any kind of strength and conditioning setting. Um, if you are not tracking your results and being transparent with those results, I'm going to be extremely skeptical because now all that is telling me your program is working is like your opinion. And
Oof.
I'm going to need more than that. I'm going to need
Mm.
to actually see numbers. I'm going to need to actually see performance results to know that you are actually getting the results that you claim you
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. That's
are.
good. Really good. Um, so I think we're kind of getting to the end of some of my questions. Um, so the students that you're speaking to right now, a lot of them are kind of on the tail end of their undergraduate degree in exercise science. We've got a lot of therapy, like people want to do a PT and OT and some athletic training. Um, what's a piece of field specific advice you would give for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I would say I kind of have a couple notes there. Um, One would be know your values. What do you value? And I'm not just talking in your profession, I'm talking in also your personal life, right? what are you really going to prioritize and
Mm.
understand what sacrifices come with that, right? I meet a bunch of people that tell me they're going to be a strength and conditioning coach at a D1 school. And I'm like, that's great. You're going to need a lot of degrees, a lot of experience, a lot of internships, a lot of working for free, and very little work to life balance to eventually make it there, right? Um, or are you looking to have a little bit more balance, right? Part of what I love about my job is it has great work to life balance, right? That's something that's very important to me. That's something I highly value. So I'm very happy with where I'm at right now. So knowing what you value, what you want to get out of your life and profession is going to be huge. And that's going to kind of help guide any decisions you make as far as do you need more schooling, right? Do you want more schooling? What do you want your long-term career to look like, right? Strength and conditioning is a very young field. I think the average career for a strength and conditioning coach is about 3 years,
Oh,
just because of how aggressive it can be on work to life balance. That understanding the reality of the field you're getting into and how that aligns with your values is going to be huge.
yeah.
I would also say just being extremely humble and having a crazy growth mindset is
Mm,
going to take you so far, right? Um, Understanding that you don't know what you don't know, right?
mm,
I would encourage everybody to look up the Dunning-Kruger effect. I see this all the time, especially in this world of fitness influencers, right? You learn a little bit of knowledge and you think you know everything. In reality, there are professionals that have dedicated their entire lives and their entire careers to this, that have a lot of valuable information to share, right?
yeah,
But you have to be able to humbly accept that information and understand that there is a lot of growth to always take place. Always be
yeah.
looking to improve, always be looking to grow, right? And with that growth mindset, ensuring that you have an environment that allows you to safely fail,
Mm,
right? That you have leadership and mentors that when you do mess up and you do fail, because it will happen, that are going to be able to help correct you and that you can grow from that. That
mm,
it's not just going to be a toxic situation of failures or handled as failures and it ends there. That those are true growth opportunities and you're going to be able to improve from that. I think that's extremely valuable for any professional.
mm. I think you made a super profound point with just having the growth mindset. I think that like within exercise science, especially within kind of the personal training realm, it's wow, this routine worked really well for me, so go do it. Like
Yes, because you did
training
it and got results. It must
training
work
works
for
so good for me, so
everyone.
I'm qualified to do it. And
Yep.
so that's I think that's dangerous. Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. Because you never know who the person you're training, how long have they trained, injuries, what's their motivation like? I think yeah, that's crucial to
Mhm.
understand that. Yeah. Um, yeah, I was gonna ask for kind of a little bit of like life advice, but I think you intertwined the two very, very well.
Very good.
Um, so I mean, I've been interrogating you for the past while. Do you have any questions for me before we call it a wrap?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I always love asking either any coworkers or any other peers that I run into, like, do you have any current either podcasts, lectures, books, anything that has come across your radar recently that you found pretty interesting or profound that I should look into?
Actually, yeah. So I am the world. I have Guinness hasn't met with me officially yet, but I have debatably the world's weakest connective tissue. And so I can grade one, grade two strain muscle by bending over to pick up a piece of rice. And
Oh,
so I have been just delving into how in the heck can we actually remodel tendons? ligaments.
Okay.
And so a lot of good research came out around, I think, I want to say the late 80s or late 90s on eccentrics.
Yes.
And a gentleman with chronic tendinopathy named Alfredson, who did eccentric training for the first time, kind of had a breakthrough. And he essentially remodeled his Achilles with 12 weeks of eccentric training. And those with tendinopathy, the world goes crazy. Yes. But now we're kind of seeing it go one step further by not neglecting the concentric phase. And so, what I've been reading up on, and class will be talking about this, in the patellar tendon and in the Achilles tendon, we're doing heavy, slow resistance training. So you're incorporating that eccentric portion of the lift. It's very slow, 3 to 6 seconds, or excuse me, 3 to 4 seconds, and then you're performing the concentric in that same 3 to 4 second range. And what we're seeing is equal, if not a little better, results. And so for me, I'm like, there is hope. Um, and so areas that I'm like about to start training in that style are my pecs. I bilaterally strained them. My left Achilles, my right bicep. All of these are areas that I've injured. Um, and so I'm very hopeful that what the literature says is legit. And so I'm excited to try it. Um, but yeah, that's something that I'm really interested in scientifically at the moment. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
awesome.
I
That's
don't go to bed daydreaming about it, but it's kind of cool. Oh, yeah,
that's very cool. I also
yeah.
wanted to ask, I was just curious, what's your favorite population to work with and why?
I love anyone who is I love working with anyone who is just unapologetically themselves or who is an authentic person. And what I mean by this is I was guilty of this too when I was younger. Go to the gym, cut off, get a pump. You look like a treat. Whether you're a man or woman, you go to the gym, you guys know it. And sometimes I think that those tertiary training goals, the aesthetic, can morph into kind of who you are.
Mhm.
Um, and you got to be careful when you do that because you don't know when it is that you're going to lose it. Um, and so I love working with people who are overweight or they want to work out for health reasons because generally they're normal, they're down to earth, and like I find that their character isn't built up by an appearance. Um, I love that. I love that. I think exercise science is cool and it's great, but at the end of the day, I'm in it for like the people and the relationships, and ultimately pointing to Christ. That is why I'm here on this earth, so I can't neglect to say that. Um, but I love working with people who want to work out for health, um, you know, work at fighting off like a disease. I was in cardiac rehab for about 2 years on and off as a GA, and that was a lot of fun. Um, and young athletes. I did coach for a little while, and they're just a blast.
Yeah.
Because they're hooligans, but at the same time, you have those ones that have the dog in them, and it's amazing to
Yeah.
see that blossom.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but yeah, that's the latest on my end of the field.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Uh, well, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to meet with me and speak. Um, Class, I hope you enjoyed this as well, and we'll go ahead and call it a wrap.
Awesome. Thank you
All
for
right.
having me.
Yeah, you're very well. Thank you.